Despite the fact that the Civil War is obviously the title, and also was by far the main element of the marketing, the way it is talked about in the movie is breathtakingly stupid and incredibly shallow. Right away, I do not support the South in the Civil War. I do not support them. I do not support them. The only reason I'm wearing this is because this is a movie about the Civil War. And I only have this hat because in the 4th grade, we did a Civil War dress-up day, and this is the hat my mom got me. She got me the wrong hat. I am a Northern boy. I'm a Union boy. I want to make that very clear. I try to approach every movie I watch with an open mind. I really want to like every movie, but just as not everyone can get a date to the prom, not every movie can be good. And A24's Civil War had a lot to prove. I mean, after all, it was billed as this big, bad, cautionary tale. This is what can happen. This could happen to you, America. This could be our Civil War. This could be our future. It had a lot riding on it. And this grandiose mission didn't really seem to make too much sense, given that the pre-release footage saw Jesse Plemons wearing Alibaba Temu princess glasses, but whatever. I'm still going into this with an open mind. And despite my open mind, all I got out of A24's Civil War was an incredibly mediocre movie, with poorly written and confusing dialogue, and multiple moments that made me scratch my head and ponder the absolute stupidity of everything that was happening in front of my eyes on the IMAX screen. It had a lot of explosive action and cool fights, but it had the politics of a 15-year-old who hates themselves and hates society. And despite this movie being called Civil War, they don't talk about the Civil War basically at all, except in throwaway lines. You end up leaving the movie going, why did any of that just happen? What? And you end up realizing, well, if the movie doesn't care, why should I? So Civil War is not really about a civil war, despite what the title may have you to believe. Instead, the plot follows Lee and Joel, a war photographer and a journalist, who then tag along with a young, up-and-coming war photojournalist named Jesse as they race to Washington, D.C. And they have to get to Washington to interview the president before secessionist forces come in and kill him. It's less of a Civil War movie and more of a road trip movie, which you would not expect by looking at any of the marketing material, but whatever. It's a road trip movie with occasional inserts of graphic violence and gore. And basically every other scene has characters directly explaining their motivations to each other with absolutely no subtext, then explaining to you what the scene is supposed to mean, because the movie doesn't really trust itself to convey that to you with, I don't know, conventional storytelling techniques, and frankly, it is right to not trust itself. And the movie is predictable, even for me, which is saying something. I am horrible at predicting the plots of movies, so if I'm guessing plot points correctly, you know your movie is in deep shit. So in this video, I'm going to break down A24's Civil War, breaking it down completely, getting into why this movie is so flawed, if there was anything they could have done to fix it, and why it just made me sit there very irritated, brooding in my negative emotions for 2 hours. Spoilers ahead, but who cares? And I'm going to take this hat off now. I feel gross. The movie starts off with the president rehearsing a speech. Who is the president, you may ask? Why? It's Nick Offerman. In this world, we have got President Ron Swanson. Yay! Yep, so the reason for the Civil War is because of Ron Swanson's libertarianism. And I don't think I should have to explain too much why this is such an important and bad decision, given the fact that this character is starting the movie and he's going to end the movie, and those are, shockingly, two very important parts of it, but I will anyway. Good at acting, he's funny, he's charismatic, he is many things, but he is not the President of the United States. If you're trying to start your super serious Civil War movie with Nick Offerman, people are not going to take you very seriously. And you could maybe say, oh, they're trying to satirize the Trump era, the reality TV president, because, oh, Nick Offerman will immediately read as a comedian. And I would say to you, that's very stupid, because we know almost nothing about the character of Nick Offerman's president. This is a very big swing and a miss from minute 1 in the movie. We then meet our main characters, Lee, an award-winning war photographer played by Kirsten Dunst of Spider-Man fame. She's in New York City covering a protest with her partner, Joel, played by Wagner Moura, who got his break playing Pablo Escobar. They're there to do journalism, kind of. We know they're covering a protest. We don't know why. This is not really explained at all, so get used to that. That'll be a running trend throughout the movie. And listen, I'm not saying every single detail needs to be explained, but given what is about to happen next, some explanation would have been helpful. Because in the next scene, we learn that they have an interview with the president. So they have gone from covering this minor protest in New York City to getting an interview with the president. Why would the president pick them, of all people? Why, after they're covering a very minor protest at like a water distribution center, have they been upgraded to getting access to the White House in the time of a war zone? It doesn't matter. Let's just move on. Let's move on. But while they were at the protest, the police accidentally whack. Glad I felt the need to put the sound effect there. They accidentally whack a young photojournalist. That is Jessie, played by Cailee Spaeny, who was in Pacific Rim and was Priscilla in Priscilla. Lee saves her from getting blown up by a bomb, and they have a nice bonding moment. Then back at the hotel, they meet again and have another bonding moment. Joel and Lee also share a drink with Sammy, played by Stephen McKinley Henderson, of Everything fame, but I particularly liked him in Dune. And Sammy really only exists in the movie to scold the characters, say I'm getting too old for this shit, I'm too old for this shit, you guys are gonna get killed. That's it. He is severely underutilized, especially given that they have an actor of Henderson's talent. Joel and Lee reveal that they have this interview that they have, again, miraculously secured with the president, and Sammy says, hey, I want to come. And they're like, okay. And the next morning, we see that, shockingly, Jessie has been invited to come along in their road trip. After Lee had went to bed, Jessie had schmoozed up Joel and Sammy, and now she's coming with them. Why should Lee care at all beyond surface reasons? Well, don't worry, in the next 3 scenes, she will tell us herself. Or rather, Sammy will, to explain it for those of us who really didn't want to have to draw any inferences or think at all during this movie. Thanks, Civil War. I didn't like subtext anyway. And with that, they're on the road trip begins, and despite America being a nation of 330 million people with millions and millions and millions of cars, in which you need a car to function in 95% of the country, they don't see any other cars. Ever. They see a bunch of ruined cars, but they do not see really any cars. They see one car throughout the entire movie that's not related to the plot, and that's it. Guys, this isn't the fucking zombie apocalypse. There's reasons for people to be out on the road. It's not like society is completely broken down. The first part of the movie is in New York City, and it's basically functional, except there's a bit more civil unrest and there are power outages. It's not like they're not even making gas either. The very first stop they go to is a gas station, but sure. There's no cars. There's no cars. It's a zombie apocalypse. Whatever. I said that very gaily, didn't I? Yeah. And as they talk to the nice man at the gas station, we learn that a sandwich costs $300.
$300 buys you a sandwich. We got ham or cheese.
But have no fear, Lee has Canadian money. Ooh, Canadian money is kind of like magic because it still works. Because yes, in a world where America has completely descended into civil anarchy, sure, Canada's fine. And I will believe that when you can buy a house in Canada for less than $700,000. Jessie investigates a little and then sees that the gas station owners are actually torturing two people that had stolen from them, even though the fact that one of them went to high school with the person who is now torturing him. Ooh, social commentary. They then get executed and Jessie starts crying about it, and Lee scolds her when they're back in the car. Come on, Jessie, act like you've been here before. And this is a scene where, again, we do know Lee's character motivations because they're explained to us in the very next scene, but you really wonder, like, why someone who knows how traumatic this career can be would immediately be like, you need to toughen up. You need to toughen up seeing people get shot in front of you, getting their blood all over. You need to toughen up. Lee, throughout the movie, is a very understanding and pretty compassionate person given all the negative things she's seen in her life. There's no reason for her to be treating this character like this, but, you know, whatever. Let's just move on. But Lee tries to make up for it by taking her to a JCPenney's parking lot where a helicopter has been shot down long ago, and the two take photos of it and bond. There's going to be a lot of these types of scenes throughout the movie, so just stay tuned. But I do feel obligated to point out now, they are not building up to anything good. There will be a conclusion to the relationship between these two, and it will be wildly unsatisfying, so stay tuned until the end, where I will complain about it at length and probably yell a little bit. They pull over to go camping for the night, and they hear distant explosions in the background. Joel gets really excited, and they all promise to check it out tomorrow in the morning. The characters bond a little bit. Lee tells Sammy that she's upset because the whole reason she got into war photography in the first place abroad is so that she could take back the lessons that war is bad back to the home front, and obviously, given that there's a civil war, that doesn't seem to have worked that well. They also smoke a joint, which shocks me, because I don't know how you could possibly want weed, aka paranoid lettuce, in an environment where people are literally being blown up and shot. I mean, yeah, sure. Cheers. Joel then has an incredibly weird and honestly sexually charged scene with Jesse in the back of their car, which comes completely out of left field, but don't worry, it's never built on or expanded again throughout the movie, so we can just kind of forget it happened. This is going to be another running theme of scenes that don't really go anywhere or add to the movie in any meaningful sense. Now look, I'm not saying that every single scene in the movie has to be directly advancing the plot as quickly as possible. Plot, give me some more plot! No. But every scene in a movie has to have a purpose, and a lot of good movies, even if they're not directly advancing the plots, they're using their scenes to accomplish things, to develop the characters in ways that make sense. Not ways that are confusing, like Joel apparently suddenly having a crush on Jesse, which is never talked about again. A lot of scenes in Civil War that don't really necessarily add anything are either confusing the character development, or they're setting up things to be paid off that are never paid off, which is bad filmmaking 101. After they go to sleep, the movie immediately jump scares us into a combat sequence full of automatic weapons and gunfire. Our main characters are following soldiers who I think are the Western forces, who are fighting people who I think are the federal government, who are clearing out a building which I think is a school, for a reason that I don't know, and there wasn't ever really one provided. Alright, so this feels like an appropriate time to talk about one of the biggest issues with the movie, the Civil War. There is none. In A24's Civil War, the actual fucking Civil War is the most underexplained and underdeveloped main plot point that I've ever seen in a movie. Like, I haven't seen anything that's this underdeveloped in years. It'd be like making a movie about Willy Wonka, but instead of talking about the factory, you're talking about the people who are just waiting behind the gates. The entire 2 hours of people waiting behind the gates. Despite the fact that the Civil War is obviously the title, and also was by far the main element of the marketing, the way it is talked about in the movie is breathtakingly stupid and incredibly shallow. And one of the things that they did to market this movie was post maps of this supposed Civil War. Now, there are 4 factions in this map, and only 2 are even remotely relevant to the plot of this movie. The Florida Alliance is only talked about once in the opening of the movie to say that they have lost a battle, and the People's Army is never even talked about at all, to my knowledge. Most of this movie is presumably conflicts between the Texas and California-led Western forces and the Ron Swanson-led federal government. And by the way, Texas and California being in the Western forces, I would like to give this movie a compass. I would also like to give them a book on American history, so they can realize why the fuck this would never happen. This movie is theoretically set in our world, there haven't been any major alt-history departures, so why are Texas and California in an alliance that only includes Texas and California, when meanwhile the other factions are seemingly gobbling up states like they're at a Golden Corral buffet? You're telling me, in the event that America actually did break down into a civil war, that Texas would respectfully mind its borders, and it wouldn't immediately murk Oklahoma? You're telling me they wouldn't take back the Panhandle? Are you sure about that? Are you sure about that? And in this world, the South is okay with being an alliance named after Florida? Really? And states like Idaho, North Dakota, South Dakota are chill with being in the same sort of alliance as Washington and Oregon? You know, maybe some of these states have been annexed, but that then begs the question, why are Texas and California still minding their own borders? So yeah, maybe some of the states are annexing each other in a way that's not explained or addressed at all in the movie, or maybe this movie is just being incredibly lazy and knows nothing about American politics or American history. And since the movie uses this sentence completely unironically, you got your start with your photos of the Antifa massacre, I'm going to guess that this movie really doesn't respect its subject material. The whole Civil War is nothing more than set dressing and a bit of a bait and switch to get people to watch the movie. And I guess it worked. After the soldiers finish the job, the gang heads to a global relief fund organized refugee camp in West Virginia. And I will say, having an international NGO set up a refugee camp in a former football stadium, that was one of the few instances in this movie where I actually felt like, okay, kudos. Effective social satire really can't be shoved down the audience's throat. Granted, there were a ton of wide shots as well as so many close-ups of children running around and playing, so they really tried to shove it down your throats. They really couldn't just take the win when they had it, but fine. The movie took the tiny amount of goodwill it had just earned and immediately squanders it with the next scene. The gang heads to a town that's seemingly untouched by the Civil War, and then they have a fun scene for the trailer.
Are you guys aware there's like a pretty huge Civil War going on all across America?
We just try to stay out. With what we see on the news, seems like it's for the best.
So movie, what are we trying to accomplish here? Because this isn't clever. This isn't worth anything more than a mild chuckle. It's very distracting. I mean, I guess it's trying to offer social commentary like, ooh, Americans wouldn't care about a civil war even if it was happening in their own backyards. They want to preserve their own normalcy and that's why they don't read the news, ooh. You know, whoop-de-fucking-do. I mean, this reads more like an SNL sketch than actual effective social satire. You really don't want to lay things on too thick, and this movie likes to Boston molasses flood you with the things it's trying to say. And just like the Boston Molasses Flood, or the Boston Molassacre, as it was funnily nicknamed, it's going all over the place, and it's dark and murky, and you can't even really tell what they're trying to accomplish. And speaking of laying things on too thick, here we have the next scene. The gang is being shot at in the car by a crazy person for no reason, leading to another trailer clip.
You don't know what side they're fighting for.
Someone's trying to kill us. We are trying to kill them.
This, by the way, is completely misleading. In the context of the trailer, this clip is clearly being used to recontextualize the whole Civil War. Like, oh man, you know, in a Civil War, we don't know who's fighting who. We're just trying not to die. Woo! And that's a pretty fine message, except I've seen it before in the media about the actual Civil War that we had in America. And it doesn't really make sense in the context of the movie, because in the movie, it actually is just a random guy shooting at them for no reason. Probably a psychopath. The person in the movie is just trying to kill people for no reason. There's no greater meaning to this clip. And even if the scene really is trying to further the messaging and the themes of this movie, it's all just so muddled. The emotional stakes are all over the place and none of it's clear at all. This movie has the emotional and thematic depth of the most annoying student film possible that somehow got a $50 million budget. But the good sniper kills the bad sniper, and we're back on our merry way. They see a car on the road and start freaking out because they haven't seen any of those. Again, stupid, but whatever. We've got one throwaway line that the interstates are vaporized, so that's why there's nobody. In fact, if the interstates are vaporized, there should be more people on these roads, right? If these are the only roads that you can use for interstate travel, why would there not be more people on them? Anyway, the car turns out to be two of their journalism friends who we were introduced to briefly at the start of the movie. And we meet these characters for no other reason than the movie is obviously going to use them as cannon fodder and murder them. Like, it's not particularly well hidden at all. Tony, played by Nelson Lee, is incredibly annoying and basically has the type of archetype in a movie that's basically like, kill me, kill me, kill me for shock value. That is basically what's about to happen. Everybody then gets captured by two rival soldiers, except for Sammy, who stays back in the car. The people who've captured them are rogue soldiers who have butchered an entire village for no apparent reason. And one of those soldiers is our boy, Jesse Plemons, who had to take a break from acting in critically acclaimed movies to acting in this piece of dog shit. And his scene was probably the most famous that came out before the movie was released.
What kind of American are you?
And this scene was stupid even in the context of the trailer, but in the context of the movie, it doesn't even really make sense. Jesse Plemons' character is going to kill two people in this sequence. He's going to kill Bohai, played by Evan Lee, just right off the bat. After Joel says, "We're journalists. He's my colleague." Then Jesse's like, "Oh, that guy was your colleague? Lol." And then we get to the trailer clip. In the Civil War, we won't be Americans. We'll be separated by what type of American we are. Ooh, scary. But the character then asks, okay, which type of American are you from? And he asks it to everybody, and they all say, "Oh, I'm from Missouri. I'm from Colorado." And he's like, "Yeah. Alright, that's cool." Even Joel, who he, interrogates, saying, are you Central American? Are you South American? And then Joel's like, "I'm from Florida," which, by the way, even if he was from Central or South America, I feel like that'd be the one to lie about. But he accepts that and moves on to the last guy. And Tony, who's crying because he just saw his friend get shot, is like, "I'm from Hong Kong." And then Jesse Plemons is like, "Oh, Hong Kong, China, bap." And then he kills him. You'd think from, the context of that clip that it would be used in the movie, "Oh, you're from New Hampshire, you know? But instead he just executes the two visibly non-American people. And then he's like, "Oh, Hong Kong equals China equals I have to kill this person." So, okay. So it's just kind of this one-off where, okay, this guy was not only a murderer, he was a racist murderer, and that's bad? Yes, it is bad. Okay, whatever. But have no fear, Sammy is here. He stayed back in the car, and he uses the car to run over the soldiers and get his friends to safety. And this is one of the things in the movie that irritated me to no end. While they were escaping, one of the soldiers got back up and started firing, as they were well off by the time he started firing, but he started firing at them regardless. And apparently at some point when they were driving away, Sammy, who was sitting in the driver's seat, mind you, gets shot and is bleeding. Yeah, Sammy was in the driver's seat, so the bullet ricocheted, sure. What a coincidence, but fine. The whole trope of the camera panning down to reveal that when you weren't looking off screen, one of the characters got shot is one of the most overused tropes But whatever. Having a character get shot off screen almost always cheapens the emotional impact, but sure. But what is completely inexcusable about this sequence is that after Sammy is shot, Joel and Lee decide to just put him in the back seat and let him die. They, despite having served in war zones for the entirety of their careers, do not think, hey, we should apply pressure to the wound. We should put bandages on it. We should do even the most bare bones of steps to provide this man with mental care. In this giant car, they apparently forgot to pack a first aid kit. They don't do anything, and they don't address it either. They don't be like, oh no, where's our first aid kit? We don't have it, fuck. They just let him die with no explanation. And maybe the wound would have been fatal anyway, but the fact that these people who care about this person just let him die, they're not even trying. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? You can tell I'm upset because of how high my voice got. And this wasn't like he died immediately. They have like a whole sequence where they're driving through a forest that's on fire where he's slowly dying. They were driving for hours. Finally, we're almost at the end of this movie. Our heroes, minus the old fart they just let die, have arrived at the Western Forces camp as they are preparing to take Washington, D.C. once and for all. So our three journalists now go and they are embedded with the Western forces as they march through the streets of DC. And I will praise the movie. I praise the movie for the things it does right. They bring in a helicopter, the Western forces do, and it just like goes to town on people and blows them up with rockets. That was cool. I saw that in the movie and I was like nodding my head. I'm like, hell yes, that was a cool moment. In general, I have nothing negative to say about the action sequences. I think they're all filmed very well and they're all pretty compelling. I have issues with the entire structure that houses these action sequences, as you've no doubt assumed by now. But yeah, they mostly just follow around the soldiers at this point, as the soldiers try not to get killed and the journalists try to stay back. You know, Lee is having a panic attack at this point for most of this sequence because she has taken Sammy's death, presumably pretty hard. And then Joel is just kind of standing there, making sure they don't die, and Jessie is getting some great shots with her film camera. So they're finally at the gates of the White House, and I know what you're thinking, this movie's almost over, and I was thinking that too. I'm like, yes. And the presidential motorcade storms out, and everyone thinks, well, naturally, okay, the president has to be in there, so they're like, they start firing at the presidential motorcade, and then Lee is like, nah, he's not here. So Lee then takes Joel and Jessie into the now unguarded White House. And like, soldiers, and by soldiers I mean like 6 soldiers, see them and they're like, hey, they might be onto something, let's follow them. And maybe I shouldn't be surprised that the combined military ingenuity of Texas and California have decided that it's fine to just send like 6 soldiers to clear one of the most militarily sought after targets in probably world history. Yeah, just send in 6 guys. It's fine. 6 guys to follow the journalists. It's fine. So the White House is initially empty, but then the soldiers come in, and that's fortuitous because then they realize there are Secret Service people there and they get into a firefight. Remember how I've talked about numerous moments where Lee and Jessie will bond? Their relationship is by far the most developed throughout the entire movie. Well, this is the conclusion. The soldiers and the journalists are on one end of a hallway and the Secret Service are on the other, and there's cover on both sides. So the soldiers and the Secret Service are like occasionally going from cover and firing at the other people, yada yada yada, military stuff, right? In this circumstance, you would never go out in the middle of the center because you'd be such an easy target and you would be shot almost instantly. Well, guess what one of the characters in this movie decides to do? They decide to go right in the center. Jessie, for absolutely no reason, goes in the center of this hallway to start taking photos, and Lee, sensing she might get shot, dives in front of her, where she is then shot to death as Jessie photographs it. Yep, why? It's hard to display this without the exact footage, but I hope that's a good enough representation. But you should just know, this is absolutely moronic. I don't even necessarily disagree with the conclusion of Lee and Jessie's character arcs being that Lee has to sacrifice herself to save Jessie, but if you're gonna do that, do it in a way that makes sense. Or maybe there's a grenade, or an explosion, or any number of ways for you to make it so that a character is not being absolutely stupid for no possible reason, and then has to be bailed out. Now, in an effort to give this movie the benefit of the doubt, we can also read this scene as an effort of Jessie trying to deliberately get Lee to save her after she goes out in the hallway, and then in the process she will die and Jessie can take the photos. Now, this could actually be very interesting if I wasn't practically bending down to suck my own dick to come to this conclusion. Her arc is about being comfortable with seeing murder, not actually murdering people. The main relationship between Lee and Jessie ends up with one of the most stupid cliche. You'd see it in like a B movie. You'd see it in the worst Bollywood action movie of all time. That's how it ends. Let's just move on. We are so close to the finish line. A member of the Secret Service, who is unarmed, tries to negotiate with the soldiers for the safe passage of the president. They go back and forth for a while, but eventually the Western forces just decide to shoot her, even though she's unarmed, and continue to go in and get to the president. They get into the West Wing, and Joel, who's basically been doing nothing for the back half of this movie except for crying after Sammy died, which again, should have at least tried to do something, maybe you wouldn't be so upset, but Joel finally gets his interview with the president. He goes to the president and asks for a quote. Nick Offerman replies, "Please don't let them kill me," which, I mean, I'm not sure how you expect him to do anything about that. This guy is an unarmed journalist, and you're surrounded by, like, multiple heavily armed soldiers. The soldiers then unload on the president and kill him as Jesse photographs it, and that's the end of the movie. That's it. We don't even know if the actual Civil War ended. But, to be honest with you, I don't give a fuck. And this moment is honestly played off really positively in the context of the movie, which makes absolutely no sense given what we've just spent the last 2 hours watching. Joel is very smug when he talks to the president, and we can tell his character thinks this is something that the president deserves to have happen to them. And the very last shots of the movie are the stills of Jesse's photographs of these soldiers smiling over the top of the corpse of the dead president. And we, have an audience, have almost no reason for this ending to make sense to us. If anything, Joel and Jesse should be there as impartial observers, and the movie, from a technical level, should not be posting these photos at the end, because it kind of justifies everything that we have just seen happen. And we have seen the Western forces execute numerous unarmed people. We have just, like, 2 minutes ago, saw them execute this unarmed person who is like, "We will surrender, we just would like you to save the president's life." They kill her, and then they kill the president without so much as a trial, or any sort of justice. And we know from these throwaway lines, if you didn't completely miss them in the thousands of other lines throughout this movie, that the president is probably not a good person, but we don't have any reason to believe that the Western forces are any better. They've executed unarmed people, but yet here is this supposedly anti-war movie saying, you know what, the good guys won at the end, because in war, there are good guys. This message is completely inconsistent with everything we've seen before this. That's all talking about how war is bad, how there's so much ambiguity, how there's so much blind... So where does this leave us? Well, I am shocked that before this movie was released theatrically, it had a 90+ on Rotten Tomatoes. That is crazy to me. But to talk about the positives briefly, this had great cinematography. These sequences, especially the action sequences, were very well done. The movie honestly created a lot of good tension. I mean, you kind of knew the characters weren't going to die in these war sequences, but you felt very tense, which I did appreciate. The actors and actresses all did a really good job given the constraints that they were working with, being the script. The script was bad. The movie is bad. It's kind of funny how that usually tends to work out, right? This movie had so many things to say. It had too many things to say. And in effect, it really ended up saying nothing. And in a movie that was supposed to be thought-provoking, the only thought that was provoked in me after I left was who decided to greenlight this movie. If ever there were a movie that struggled severely because it did not even do basic amounts of world building, it was this one. You simply cannot tell a story about a hypothetical civil war in modern-day America without doing the necessary work to actually ground this conflict in the world of which it exists. You just can't. It's such a sensitive subject, given the dialogue and discourse of American politics, especially in these past few years. You can't just do what this movie did and just say, there's a civil war happening, and there's a faction called the People's Army. We're not going to talk about them, but they're there. What the hell? And you could argue that the logistical nitty-gritty of a civil war and the reasons and the background and yada 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 are not necessary for the thematic messaging of your movie, and okay, sure, you're probably correct, but then I would say, what is the actual thematic messaging of this movie? The only consistent thing is kind of a general undercurrent of war is bad, which, there's really not a lot of people who are saying it's good. Now, obviously, media about war being bad still has to be created, but the supposedly anti-war movie glorifies war in its last moments. And I've talked about it enough already, but the emotional coda of Jesse either willingly or unwillingly getting Lee killed, as it was implemented in the movie, is stupid and literally made me sigh in the theater. It was really, really bad. A house divided against itself cannot stand, and a movie divided as to why it exists cannot stand either. If you're looking for a movie with fun action that you can shut your brain off to, I recommend Captain America's Civil War. They are not trying to say anything deep and profound about American history, and it has Spider-Man. So that's going to do it for me, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like, please subscribe. I do all sorts of reviews and pop culture videos like this. Every like, every subscription, every comment helps the channel. Appreciate you all. Leave a comment, let me know what you think. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you for the next one. And as always, my name is Patrick, but my friends call me Pat.